So on the most left hand side, it actually refers to the hour, minute, second, and millisecond. I'm not forgetting the setting for the lock and the visibility. So when you do locking, that means to say you can't do any adjustment at all within the lock layer. Yes, then you see that the frame is actually moving.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and stay tuned. Alright, so today we are here with the tutorial of Adobe Premiere Pro. So I think by now everyone is sort of familiar with what is the software in Adobe that is available. So in particular, I would like to discuss about Adobe Premiere Pro. So basically Adobe Premiere Pro is a software that enables the user to edit, add and to create visual effect on your video. So it's one of the industry's most sought after editing tool for professional videographer, editors, and also I would say aspiring filmmakers in that sense. So it's been used in a lot of high budget blockbuster, even middle school budget, and a lot of competitions are endorsing Adobe Premiere Pro as one of the tools itself. So it's definitely a software that regardless of industry, is something that you will definitely need to learn in order to elevate your content better, or if you want to deliver a better quality of presentation. Alright, so I hope this is something that you guys feel excited to learn more in Adobe Premiere Pro.
So when every time you create a new project, this setting will come up with the untitled and the location. So this is actually a standard setting by Premiere Pro. You can determine where you want to save the location. So once you click the browse, by default you will also see a folder named Adobe Premiere Pro Autosave. So that folder, don't mind it and try not to delete it because it actually contains the backup file of your process file as well, because you know Adobe Premiere Pro has a lot of adjustment that you have to make. As of the others, which is a general setting, scratch this and ingest setting, just let it be. Don't have to worry about it for now. So once you have actually clicked OK, yeah, it's okay because just now it's a previous session that I made. Yeah, so for example, when you entered this part here, yeah, just let it load for a while. Yes, so you'll see this empty template of how the system should look like by default. So you'll see the effect controls. This blank image is supposed to be the video that will be on display, and then this will be the part where we have the raw video footage that is prepared to be used to do some editing. And inside the timeline here, you'll see the video and the audio line timeline coming together, and with effect controls that you can do adjusting settings when it requires. Then sorry, I forgot to cover this part, which is supposed to be the soundbar when the video is actually being casted. So without further ado, let me just take a look at the sample that I've prepared in advance. Yep. So as you can see, it actually looks a bit haphazard and a bit messy, but don't freak out. I'm gonna walk you through some of the steps along the way. So before that, let me just delete this one in a bit. Okay, never mind. Just let it be. Okay, right. So now that we are looking into the pages, it might look a bit messy and stuff, but let's tidy it up so that it's not as freaking as it is not supposed to be. Alright, so cool. Okay, great. So now we are currently looking at the screen that is identical to the blank page just now, with the addition of the items over here. So as you can see that on the left side here, we have the adjustment for the video and audio. Yep, let me just delete this first and go back to the default setting. And when we look into this area here, we have the video and the audio. So as straightforward as the video is actually the part where we're emphasizing the visual, and then the audio is where we emphasize the sound. So as we are playing, then you also see, yeah, so you also see the soundbar actually follows through the frequency of the sound. So that's where we have to be mindful of balancing the sound and the visual at the same time. And it's very particularly important when we are doing editing for music. Yeah. So this is where we can do the zooming and zooming out for the footage. And yeah, as we can see on this part here, so the part where I would like to emphasize is firstly the timing. So on the most left hand side, it actually refers to the hour, minute, second, and millisecond. Yeah, so this millisecond is actually determined by how many frame rate per second of your video. Some video will be 25 frame per second and some is 50 frame per second. So what does this say by frame per second? So imagine that you have more frame per second, meaning to say you can do a lot more within 1 second. So that means to say there are a lot more frames that you can adjust, and that would really help, especially when it comes to the realm of slow motion. The higher your frame per second or FPS, the better it is for you to work on. But that is subjective to your camera itself. So from here, so another thing I'd like to highlight is that this zooming function. So the lower the percentage, of course, the more zoom out it will be. So 100% would be more on standard. Then when you do more zooming in, this is where you see that things are getting more zoom in. Then for ease of viewing, usually people will just go with fit setting. Or if you want to go a bit more detailed, 200 it is. Then you see this quarter, a half, and full. What does this actually mean is that when you are doing the preview of the file itself, a quarter will essentially meaning to say you notice that just now in the movement of the file itself, it's actually getting more blurry, as you can see here. But as a result of that blurriness, the transition and the movement is actually smoother. Yeah, so you see that it's actually moving rather smoothly as compared if, let's say, we are gonna use like a full setting. Yeah, so right now it's not very obvious, but actually if you are doing it in the default setting, right, what would happen is that the full setting will tend to have a bit more lagging time, and it will affect the performance of your entire production system. So I would suggest that we start off with either half or even a quarter when the situation arises. Alright, so not forgetting the setting for the lock and the visibility. So when you do locking, that means to say you can't do any adjustment at all within the lock layer. So when you do invisibility, meaning to say that your layer would be visible, or in the equivalent of the audio, it's the same as using mute. Yeah, so that's the part where we are gonna use the mute, and when the situation arises when you have multiple layers and you don't want to get yourself confused. And this solo track, what does solo track actually means? So what solo track actually does is that it will actually play only and only on that part itself. Yeah, so for example, if I were to highlight only at the first audio track there, so notice that, yeah, so you'll notice that the sound actually comes out only from the first layer, which is the layer that was being highlighted. The second layer that was down here, it actually didn't come out any sound at all because it's not being highlighted. Okay, now let's try if I stack it together. Now let's go back to the setting on the left side here. So we have video and audio setting, the same as we have for the timeline here, alright? So as we can see, there are positions to adjust whether we are going to do it on the left side, right side, or maybe on top and bottom, alright? So on the hindsight, let's take a look at the scale. So this is to aid you in terms of zooming in or zooming out. Then rotation side is because originally the video is recorded in a horizontal setting. However, the brief require me to do a vertical adjustment. So that's where I actually do a flip of 90 degrees, and that's how I reverse it to vertical instead of the original, which is horizontal. Alright, then opacity, it's the same as transparency, meaning to say if let's say two layers are being set together, so you will see that actually the second layer actually is on top, which overshadow the first layer, right? So if I want to let them being seen together, then I just have to reduce the opacity on the upper one, then I can see the one on below together already. So essentially they are overlapping against each other. But do note that this overlapping is limited to the visual only. If you want to do an additional setting on the audio, that one you have to do your fine tuning on your end. Alright. Then on the audio side, we have a more straightforward procedure, which is to do a certain leveling, which is to adjust the decibel. We want it to be higher or we want it to be lower. And on the bottom side here, you can see that the left and the right is to complement the stereo experience. So for example, if you want the left side to be slightly stronger or slightly weaker, then we can do adjustment from here, and you realize that actually the left side is actually being altered as opposed to the right side. Yeah. Then you see in terms of this timing itself, you see that this toggle animation, like in the shape of the clock and also the diamond here. So what does it actually do? Well, so what it actually does is that, okay, let me just go back to the opacity here. Yeah, so what it actually does is that it actually allows you to do an animated setting. So for example, how do you make the frame to move around? So for example, I choose movement. So from this movement, and then I just choose how far do I want it to move. So for example, just a bit towards this side. Yes, then you see that the frame is actually moving. Yeah, because without this, right, what would happen is that, yeah, so when we do this setting alone, that means to say we need to determine the start and the end, and this is where the keyframing becomes important, to determine which is the starting point and which is the ending point, and how do we expect the start point to be and the end point to be. Alright, then if we are talking about how to connect different points together, right, so this is where we talk about transitions. So in transitions, we also have video and audio transition. So from here we have, for example, let's just choose, for example, like the constant power, and also another constant power on the other end. Right, so you see what will happen. Yeah, so it actually goes down and goes up again. So essentially that will help to make it slightly more seamless and not so much as being too tacky. Yeah, so that part is exactly the area that we want to eliminate. Alright, and also for video transition, we also have different one. Usually the one I'll use by default is actually dissolve. So from the dissolve part, you will see that the transition is actually helping to go to black and then go to the screen again. Yeah, and you see that the timing is actually a bit too short. So in that case, I'll just put my mouse nearby here and then just pull it to whichever I want. And you see that, yeah, so you see that the frame of which it goes to black is actually longer, and your eyes will be slightly more soothing instead of suddenly pop in a flash. So that really helps a lot. Alright, then along the way, we will also have these kind of audio effects and also the video effect. So these are things that we can add on to make the view like more blur, or do you want things to move around in a more dynamic setting. So you can take your time to explore and really understand how things work here. Then, okay, a bit on the technical side here, because we also talked about how we actually adjust the setting and also the size of the frame, right? So just for the benefit of the doubt, so this is how we do it for sequence settings, and this is where I actually did my adjustment. So by default, you know, the setting is actually supposed to be horizontal, which is 1290 and 1080, right? So essentially what I did is that I reversed the number, and that's where I got the keyframe to be on a vertical orientation. So just now when I mentioned about how many frames per second, so this is exactly where I did the adjustment from here. And actually, of course, when you do the frame per second, it is actually subjective to how much your camera has actually captured, because you can't essentially take more frame per second and you put over here while the original one that you've taken from your camera is like 12 frames per second. Is not doable that way. Yeah, so that's basically the technicality of the camera that you need to sync over to Premiere Pro, which by default it has already been done in such a way that it helps to do your seamless editing. However, there are some adjustments which might call for exceptional decision making. So I hope this is something that will help you along the way as you are trying to create new stuff. Then before we end this video, also another part which is exporting, which is very important when we are gonna execute the job. So from here, we actually will determine the file name, the location as of which we're gonna save the file, and for the standard setting, which will not go wrong at all. So you can do the high quality 1080 HD, which is a high definition by default. And then for the format, H.264 is usually sort of like the industry terminology of just putting a high resolution. So no need to do anything from there. It's all good. Then if you want to do more adjustment, then you can take your time to really understand what this is all about. Yep, and also for the audio, we actually keep it the same as such, so we have nothing to adjust from here, unless if you are really particular about the timing and also about the frequency of the sound itself, then you can do adjustment from there. Do note that depending on the duration, or also depending on the hertz of the bitrate, which is essentially in the audio, that will impact on the end size of the file itself. So for example, now that we are looking into it, it's about 1 gigabyte. So what we can do is that we can reduce the duration, and then when I click here, the end zone here, you'll notice that the estimated file size actually decreased significantly. So it actually really depends on the duration of the file itself. So once you actually are sure of the duration and how it's supposed to look like, you just have to click this export button and it'll just load. So once it has finished, then it'll come out with the folder in the MP4 version, ready for you to upload or ready for you to view. So that's more or less the general setting of Adobe Premiere Pro. So for the more details, we can cover this part in the next few videos afterwards. So I hope you've gained something from here about how the basics of Premiere Pro is, and I hope this has helped. Thank you very much, and see you.